Hey guys, so this is episode 2 of my honors colloquium activist project. So today specifically we're going to be looking at environmental activism and just talking about the environment in general. So as you all know, currently right now, climate change is a huge thing. We had G20 only a couple weeks ago. We have all these summits about it. A lot of countries are meeting up. Joe Biden's going to be meeting the president of China soon to talk about climate change, and so it's a really big issue since there's just so much pollution, so much going on, and our planet is just dying. So, first of all, to start this off, I am going to be talking about, why it's important to care about the environment, what's this whole climate change issue. Then I'm going to go into all electric, which is a huge thing right now, for those of you who don't know. There's been this whole thing going on for a long time about we should switch to all electric cars. And there's pros and cons to that. And so we'll go into that a little. And then lastly, we'll talk about other things you can do outside of all electric. Because obviously, whether or not we're able to go all electric, whether or not it works, it cannot solve every problem that is building up to this issue that is climate change. So that's today's episode. So what is climate change and why is the environment important? Well, climate change, at least by dictionary and most websites, is usually defined as an abnormal change from the average temperature, the average weather, just a change in the environment overall. And so we see that a lot in more recent times where we are getting abnormal weather in many places. Good example, Texas, only a while back, had that really big freeze down south. And it wasn't only Texas, it was Louisiana and other places. Which, it's very, very, very rare for it to be extremely cold in Texas. Okay, they get snow once every 100 years. That's an over-exaggeration, but point made. The environment is important overall. Firstly, obviously, we live on this earth, this planet, and we want to keep living here. And the environment gives us our food, it gives us our water, it gives us all the resources we need to keep living onward. All the gas we use comes from the ground, oils, salt, everything comes from natural resources. And those natural resources we get from this environment. And currently our big issue is we are sucking this entire world dry of its natural resources practically, trying to just live as a human race with all the technology we have and the advancements and just in general. That there is such a big population of humans right now, and we are struggling to get enough resources to be able to help produce enough for all these people living. And, another part on top of, the obvious that we live here, the environment's important, it cleans our air, and it's what gives life to this planet. And that's honestly common sense reasons, of course. And it's not one of those situations anymore when we're talking about climate change. The whole reason it's such a big deal is because we can't ignore it much longer. It's so obvious. It's right there. It's not normal. Granted, this was 5 years ago or so, where it was warm in March in Chicago. For anybody who lives in Chicago, it's not supposed to be above 70 degrees in March. It's not even supposed to be above 65. But it was warm. It was 80 something. It was great. That's not normal though. And so that's why there are things being done about climate change and trying to help the environment and try to save it so that way we live on and our planet keeps producing. Now, here's the thing. After talking about climate change and the environment and the importance of it, now we're going to talk about the all-electric plan currently that is being pushed very hard, and its pros and its cons. here's the thing. All electric sounds fantastic. It really does. That means we aren't putting gas in the air, we aren't polluting, we don't need to use gas, the cars will be completely different, there will be some parts we won't need anymore. We will, everything will be full on electricity, we won't be harming the environment. That sounds great. But what people don't realize the cons are to this kind of stuff is the fact that, first of all, for those of you who don't know what lithium is, it's a kind of metal of sorts that we take from the earth and is used for batteries, which is the big part of it. But it's used in general for our products, but the big part of it is used for batteries that would charge those cars. We are having a current lithium shortage. We do not have enough lithium on this planet to do this. Now, granted, I will point out, for those of you who have done your research, there is a guy who formerly worked with Elon Musk, and he has found a way to recycle lithium batteries used before, which would be a great help to the all-electric plan. On the other hand, though, from the looks of it, his project's underfunded. It's not given much attention. No one's talking about it. And so there goes that. There's not really any mention of if that's going to be used or if it's going to help. The other thing is the amount of electricity needed for this. We currently do not have the capabilities to have enough electricity for all electric. We would need such advanced grids, electrical grids, to do all electric. And we would need to have, these charging stations all over the place. And on top of that, we have to consider the fact that whether we like it or not, electricity also has its own pollution problems because we get electricity from plants and plants create pollution. So, not much change there. Another thing is you have to look at the work field. By going all electric suddenly, all the people who build gas cars, a lot of gas stations, certain parts stores, mechanics possibly who are more used to working on gas-fueled cars are all going to go out of business. All these companies that are building gas-fueled cars are suddenly going to have to close. There are going to be millions of people without work. Like that. We already have an issue with unemployment. That's just going to make it even worse. And so that's just the issues with the all-electric plan. It sounds great, but it's not being thoroughly thought through. And obviously, they're also not being informed the best. And the other problem, of course, is that seems to be the only thing we see them talking about. We don't see other solutions being brought up in the news, in the media, on commercials. It's just the all-electric. And that's an issue. So now that we've gone over pros and cons of the all-electric plan, I realize it was mainly cons, but just explaining that situation and the fact that it's covered so much and we don't see other solutions, here is a talk about some other solutions. First great example of other solutions is there's this company. I will link the Insider article down below in the description area of the video. And this article is talking about how this company has found a way to use the Mycellium mushroom, Mycelium fungus, to create Styrofoam. Styrofoam takes 300 years to decompose. Just about. This mushroom will decompose instantly. It's much healthier to the environment. It's much safer to the environment. Obviously, it won't take as long, and it'll just basically be, when it decomposes, food for the environment and make it better. They've also found not only a way to make it into Styrofoam, they've found a way to make it as a replacement for leather and as a replacement for bacon. But although there's an Insider article about it, there's not really any big investment towards it currently. We don't see it being used outside of maybe a few small companies in the city that it comes from. Another thing to talk about that nobody wants to talk about, but but here we go, is the fact that we are building way too much. We do not have any forest left practically because we keep developing. We have abandoned lots here in Chicago, and yet they'd rather build some extensions or a new airport in the last preserved prairie in all of Illinois than maybe choose like empty lots or find a place that's vacant that they could turn maybe into like a small airport. You know, they would rather tear up land than use one vacant lot or vacant building that's been abandoned. And so that's becoming an issue is we are developing so much. Sometimes the development is honestly unnecessary. Actually, it's starting to not be as necessary as some development. It just occurs because they think it'll get our money. Not all cases, just saying some. And that takes away from the land. And so now we have less and less land. We don't have as many trees that are cleaning up the air. We don't have as many animals around. We don't have as many plants that are just, you know, on the land, making it a better, healthier place. And that's one of our big issues that they don't want to talk about because that is a big move for politicians, to be honest, is contracts for development are big for them and give them a lot of money. So that's another thing they don't want to talk about. And then obviously the third thing, very obvious, we need to put more funds into recycling and seeing what can be recycled, what can't. We need more recycling centers in Brazil. And I'll see if I can find the video and put the description below or the documentary that I found. And it was about a dump, biggest dump in all of Brazil, and also one of the biggest dumps in the world, in Rio de Janeiro. And it's huge. And they have been asking for a recycling center for years. And the president refuses to give them one. And they've been trying to find ways to recycle on their own because there are huge amounts of trash that get dumped there, and so much of it can be recycled. But they have no recycling center, so they can only do so much with going in there, picking out what can be recycled on these mountains and mountains and mountains of trash, and then taking weeks, months, years to recycle it on their own because they don't have a center. So those are just some obvious solutions. Anyways, now that I've gone over just generally explaining climate change, what it is, why the environment's important, explaining the all-electric plan, pros and cons of it, and it was mainly cons, and just explaining other issues that should be looked at or things that should be considered. Hopefully you learned a bit more. I do understand that most of you obviously can't do anything about politicians, them choosing to take development contracts. You can't do much about funding. Of course, though, you can do small things in your everyday life. You know, try to use your car less when possible. Realize if you live in this city of Chicago, doing that in wintertime is impossible practically. But, you know, when it's nice and warm, you know, try to bike more. You know, try to be wary of how much water you use. Try to eat less animal products. And just the general things they tend to tell you to do. You know, plant trees and other flowers and other plants if you can in your backyards or at home. Maybe show up if you want to like an environmental march, or I don't know if any of you are aware, sometimes park districts do like clean up the park days or clean up the forest preserve days and they just pick up trash. Try volunteer for those, and those are just some things you could do for now. Anyways, hope to see you guys next episode. See ya!